So in the previous devlogs, I've been remaking the basic stuff from the old game, as well as some new things, but there's been one pretty central element of the old game that I've so far ignored, and it's one of the biggest reasons I wanted to turn this into a proper game in the first place, and that's chaos. So this is a game mode where each round something random is changed about the rules of the game, and it doesn't tell you what that is, so you just have to figure it out each round, which leads to a lot of funny and unexpected things. These are the different chaos game modes in the old game, and each round the game picks one of these at random and changes stuff accordingly. Don't look at this is gross. Now there's a couple problems with this system, but all of them stem from its inflexibility. Say I want to have a whole bunch of these game modes, which is what I'm going for, so instead of just having faster players or slower players or 3-ball bounces or 10-ball bounces, I also want to have combinations of these. Of course, not all of these combinations make sense together, but we'll get to that later. And what I've been doing so far is making some of these combinations by hand, which is why you'll notice that we have a game mode with teleportation and a bunch of other game modes with teleportation along with something else. Now, making these by hand takes a lot of effort and is very unscalable, so it'd be nice if there was a way to take these different modifiers and combine them automatically. That way we could have hundreds of different combinations leading to hundreds of unique chaos game modes. But we can't just combine anything with anything else. The most obvious of these are the things that modify the same value, but there are much less apparent ones. For example, infinite bounces should never be combined with teleportation, because in teleportation the player can't move while the ball is in motion, and the teleportation itself happens after the last bounce, which is clearly an issue if the ball never stops bouncing. So, if we figured out some way of telling the game which modifier works with another modifier, we could then automatically make combinations of them. So, here's a table of compatibility. Blue panels are combinations that already exist in the old game, green ones are viable combinations, yellow ones have some issues or just don't make sense, gray ones modify the same things, and red ones are not viable. Now, this table will be very useful outside the game, since it's a really good way for me to check the compatibility of each combination of two modifiers, but a very big issue is trying to get this into the game. You see, it's not enough for me to know what combinations should and should not be allowed, because if we want the game to make combinations automatically, it also needs to know that, meaning we somehow have to convert this thing into code. And a massive matrix of ones and zeros would just be terrible to read or modify, so I'd like to find another way. This is all stuff that I thought of when I was just starting out on the new game. I knew this was one of the things I wanted to get right this time, and I also knew just how central this was to the way I wanted the game to be played, which is why the new game has basically been built around the ability to easily change any value or functionality in the game from a single location. Enter the game modifiers. And for this to seem as exciting as it should, I need to bring you back to the old game. And while I'd much rather burn all the code from it and throw the ashes into the deepest depths of deep space, here's how the chaos game modes used to work. The game would pick a random number as a chaos game mode, and then every script would manually change their values based on that number if their values needed to be changed. Now this is horrific, but at least it worked, which was sort of the whole idea with the old game. Getting to an end result as fast as possible, and with no consideration to good or sensible coding practices. You could almost call it a prototype. In fact, it's basically the textbook definition of a minimum viable product. And actually, if I stopped referring to it as the old game and rebranded it to the prototype, which it was quite successful at being, it could seem a lot less like a failure and more like a learning opportunity. Anyway, in the new game, I wanted to do things a lot more elegantly, and so at the very start of development, I made a dictionary with a whole bunch of different game modifiers, like the ball bounce amount, the ball speed, ball size, and so on. And I kept adding these whenever I wanted something else in the game to be controllable from here. These values by themselves don't do anything, of course, but in the corresponding scripts, I could then take these values into consideration. For example, take the ball bounce amount, which I've set to 5 in the game modifiers. Whenever a ball spawns in the game, it checks what the ball bounce amount is in the game modifiers and sets its own bounce amount to that. In the same script, you can see that the speed of the ball also changes based on the ball start speed and the scale of the ball based on the ball size. This means that I can change any value from this script and it'll change in the game as long as I've coded it to do that first. So once I got to the point in development where I wanted to start implementing Chaos gamemodes again, my first idea was to just change some of these values randomly each round just to see how that would work. And as it turns out, it was incredibly incoherent. It was definitely chaotic, just not in a fun way. So I thought back to the prototype, where the Chaos gamemodes were, in contrast, very coherent because each one was manually created and tuned. I wanted the new system to have that manual control to create cohesion, while also reaping the benefits of being able to combine different things automatically, leading to a huge amount of unique Chaos gamemodes. And I'm really glad to say I think I figured out a really good way of doing this. Enter combos. These are collections of changes to the game modifiers, each of which combines into a cohesive thing, a modifier combo. Like, for example, faster players increases not only the player's speed, but also the player acceleration and the player walk animation speed. Infinite ball bounces makes the balls bounce infinitely, but it also stops the ball from slowing down after each bounce, which it would normally do. And it also makes teleporting false, which seems weird, but I'll get to why that is soon. So the way these work in the game is that at the start of a round, we check how many different combos we want, then we pick a random one from the modifier combo list and check if there are any conflicts. Because these lists are empty right now, we can add the combo's name to the active combo and the modifiers to the active modifiers. Then if we want more than one combo, we pick another random one and check for conflicts again. If the combo tries to modify modifiers that are already being modified, like it does here, we can just toss it and pick a new one randomly. Here's the infinite ball bounces again, which has that mysterious teleporting equals false thing. Teleporting is already false by default, so at first glance this doesn't seem to do anything at all. No conflicts though, so we can add the combo. I'll briefly come back to this matrix of viable and unviable modifier combinations, where you'll see that infinite bounces and teleportation are not a viable combination. What you might also realize is that we no longer need to try and shoehorn this matrix into the game. Because teleportation is set to false with the infinite ball bounces combo, if we try to add any combo that adds teleportation, it'll automatically be rejected because of the conflict. And I can stop any combos from being combined together by adding the right restrictions to one or both of them. That's the gist of it. Once we've added enough valid combos, we can start the round. And if we don't want to repeat any of the same combos on the next round, we can, at the end of the round, just move the active combos to the previous ones and then reject any combos that were used on the previous round. And what this means in the grand scheme of things is a lot of possible combinations leading to a lot of unique Chaos game modes. Currently I've made a total of 34 combos, but in the end I'm aiming to have at least 60, and I'll keep adding them as long as I keep having ideas. With some combination calculations, we can see that with 60 combos to choose from, there's a pretty impressive amount of different combinations depending on how many combos we want. Let's just pretend that combo and combination are two different words with two different meanings. Of course, the more combos we add, the more of these combinations will be invalid, but we're still going to end up with a number that's multiple magnitudes bigger than what I could have done by hand, so get excited. Anyway, here's some chaos. Oh, and it feels crazy to say, but I just hit 1,000 subscribers. And it's insane to me how there's now 1,000 people that care about the stuff I do. Obviously, the amount of people who watch me won't change what I do or how I do it. I'm not here for the numbers, I'm here to make stuff because making stuff makes me feel nice. But it is also nice to know that there are people out there who care about the stuff I make. So, thanks.